Good evening and welcome to another Bright News discussion. My name is Shannon Braswell, and today I'm joined by Mr. Gil Bailie. So, Mr. Bailey, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's been a long time in the making. I was trying to get this set up, a while ago, but you know, we're here now, right? So,
That's right.
yeah. Well, for starters, can we just start with maybe an introduction of yourself and your career and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, well, I don't really have a career. Have never had a career.
Okay.
I've I've had a journey.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I never knew what was the next twist and turn in the road.
Right.
I've, I have a certain persistence, so that when some of these twists and turns came at right angles or 180 degrees and so on, I followed them.
Okay.
So it's a meandering path, but it was always an attempt to uh, discover what was true
Hmm.
and how I fit into it,
Right.
and so on. I went astray for a while
Hmm.
and got caught up in the spirit of the age,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I learned from that,
Yes.
and so as far as the actual details, uh, I'm proud to say that I got a mediocre education
Hmm.
at a mediocre university and at a slightly above mediocre law school.
Okay.
But I'm proud of that because today, having a degree from a mediocre university is a lot more prestigious than having one from the
Ivy League.
from the Ivy League. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I was a mediocre student.
Hmm.
But after I got out of law school, I never took the bar, never practiced law, but I did graduate from law school.
Okay.
But after I got out, I wandered around. I was in Tennessee. I went to California.
Okay.
Just I just had never been. I never been to Northern California, so
Okay.
I went out there just on my own.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, and I spent the rest of my life here in
Wow.
California.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
I was caught up in the spirit of the '70s,
Hmm.
but then I kind of came to my senses when I got married and had children.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I can't. Now, one thing you should probably know, that as a as a child and as a young person,
Hmm.
I went to mass. I'm a Catholic. I went to mass every day,
Okay. Hmm.
all the way through to my last year in law school.
Okay.
And one day I walked out in the middle of the week,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, you know, I'm not coming back. I wasn't angry with the church. I didn't think I'd lost my faith,
Hmm.
but I just thought, no, I've been doing this every day for years. I'm not
Hmm.
going to come back. The stupidest mistake I ever made. So 10 years later,
Hmm.
when my first child was born, I went back to mass every day. So
Hmm.
it was every day, every day, every day, and then nothing for 10 years. And
Wow.
then every day, every it didn't trail off. It didn't trail off at either end.
Right. Right. Right.
so,
Right.
so that's not terribly apropos. Maybe it is of what we're talking about today. But I became very curious uh, in terms of literature and theology and philosophy and so on.
Hmm.
So I started reading books. I had no guidance. I just, whatever came into my
And yeah.
view, and after a while, I had to support my habit, which was reading these books. So I
Yeah.
started a little educational operation in Sonoma
Okay.
where I offered courses
Hmm.
in whatever I wanted to read thoroughly.
Hmm.
So I I taught courses in and Homer and Virgil and Shakespeare and Dante and T.S. Eliot and so on, and the New Testament, Old Testament,
Mhm.
uh, and and those people in the community who wanted to, walk through these texts came, and we had a glorious time. It lasted for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm going to be long-winded just to shorten the.
No, please.
But during at one point in this vocation of mine,
Mhm.
there was a biblical uh, conference in my little town,
Mhm.
and I knew the man who was organizing it,
Okay.
and he was he was more of a he he was a biblical scholar in the sense that he thought it was his job to 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 dismantle the text
Mhm.
so as not to pull the wool over anybody's eyes or something.
Right. Right.
He was a nice man, but he
Yeah.
called me and he said, out of the blue, he called me and he said, uh, several of these scholars have gotten Rene Girard to agree. Rene Girard,
Mhm.
we'll have to tell you about him later.
Yes. Yes.
Unbelievably important figure in our time.
Yes.
It just so happens that 6 months before,
Mhm.
I had stumbled upon Rene Girard's a book of his
Mhm.
called "Violence and the Sacred"
Yeah.
in the University of California bookstore. It
Okay.
was on sale, so I
Okay.
bought it. I brought
Okay.
it home. You've probably heard this story. Many
Mhm.
people have heard this story. I'm just rehearsing it for those
Oh
few
yeah,
who
man.
haven't heard it already. Anyway, so I brought it home and I started reading it,
Mhm.
and it just blew my mind. I
Yeah.
thought this man he has seen into the real issue of our time.
Right.
So I was reading that book and I was happy to talk about it to anybody. And my friend calls me up a few months later
Yeah.
and he says, I know you're interested in Girard.
Mhm.
Several of these biblical scholars have gotten Girard to agree to come to Sonoma and to spend a day talking to them about the implication of his work for biblical study.
Mhm.
And he said to me, I don't have a place for this. Could we do it in your office?
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
you had to try to imagine what that's like. I didn't know I didn't know if Rene Girard was dead or alive. I didn't
Okay.
know whether he lived here or in France.
Right.
I just knew his work.
Yeah.
And so suddenly he's coming to my and I'm not an academic. I'm
Right.
completely outside. I
Yeah.
knew some of these biblical scholars from some meetings I went to,
Yeah.
but I'm completely outside the academy.
Mhm.
And suddenly in my office,
Mhm.
a group of biblical scholars are going to sit there and listen to Rene Girard
Yeah.
all day long.
Right. Right.
I thought I just couldn't believe it. Well, this
Yeah.
is so um, so that was how I got to know Rene,
Okay.
and we became friends.
Yeah.
And it was a friendship that was immensely important to me. And
Yeah.
everything I did after that was profoundly influenced by his work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was a great personal friend and a kind, warm, gentle,
Yeah.
marvelous person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now, so then to finish out the story a little bit,
Mhm.
I realized shortly thereafter that there was a kind of intellectual embargo on his work because he had written earlier. As a matter of fact, that first book I read,
Mhm.
Violence and the Sacred, people read it and thought that the author was an atheist.
Okay. Yes. Mhm.
And then he published another book, Things Hidden from that Foundation of the World. It
Mhm.
became perfectly clear that he was a Christian.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
suddenly he became persona non grata in the academy. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and so, and
Yeah.
I've realized because I'd never been associated with the academy, so I didn't understand these fissures,
Mhm.
So as I came to become familiar with him, and I went regularly down to Stanford
Hmm.
for seminars with Rene, and we'd have lunch together and so on.
Hmm.
And then I decided, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I thought,
Hmm.
I'll just write a book that about biblical things
Hmm.
using Girard,
Hmm.
and I will outflank the embargo so that the ordinary person out there
Right.
could become acquainted with his work.
Yeah.
So I wrote my first book, Violence and the Sacred. I mean, Violence Unveiled,
Uh-huh.
and that got a lot of play.
Okay.
So I went on the road giving talks, and I basically stayed in that mode up until I wrote my second book 10 or 15 years later.
Hmm.
Um, and what else could I tell you about that?
Yeah.
Um, well, it was
Yeah.
it,
Where
it
you?
was a it was a great it was an earthquake
Yeah.
in my life and my thinking and my faith,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Okay. And what about, because that's interesting. You bring up violence in the sacred. I had when I first learned about Gerard, and I tell everybody this. I mean, I never met him, or anything like that. I think I was just a little too young to sort of really, you know, be in that spirit of the times, but it would have been really cool to, I think, have met him, and everything. He seemed like a very laughy person, very, very full of laughter, and very curious about things. And that's sort of how I uh you know came to read his work and stuff, because he seemed like he had just this great interest in anthropology and things like that for its own sake. Like, he wanted to know. And when I read Violence in the Sacred, I had already had this passion for anthropology. I was in high school and stuff like that, and I was reading stuff and reading, uh, what's that anthropologist's name? I think his name is Claude Levi Strauss.
oh yes,
He'd
sir.
gone to South America and everything. I was interested in Melanowski and how he went to Papua New Guinea, and all that. And just I would see National Geographic, at that time, like in the '90s, early 2000s. You could watch, like, documentaries about various tribes in Africa and South America, all that. And I was so interested in the idea of, like, rituals and sacrifice, and you know religion, and everything. And so when I started when I started reading Violence in the Sacred, I said, oh man, okay, now this is somebody who's, I'm a couple years too late. I came I came on the scene a little too late. you
Oh, I
know I,
don't think so. No, no, that's you. I envy you in a way to come upon it that early in your
yeah.
life.
Yeah, I mean, it was it's just like, I guess it's the same way that, if somebody really likes math, they're just interested in it,
Uh-huh.
because it's something that they just like numbers, and
Right.
that's the same, I think, passion I had for anthropology. Like, I just wanted to know, you know, until like you said, until you really start having uh, real life experiences. And then
Uh,
you start saying, now, how does this work in my life? How does this help me? So then,
yeah.
so then I started really looking like, okay, is there any more that I can glean from Girard that'll help me in my personal life? And that's when I started to understand the whole idea of mimesis and how we imitate each other. You know, I have yet to read his other books, things hidden since the foundation of the world, which I know he did with Dr. Urgulian.
Yeah.
They've done, some transcripts or something, and battling to the sacred, battling to the end, and things like that. But uh, I wanted to get back to what was it like working with Gerard? Like, you know, I listened to some of the recordings that you and him had. Was that at the conference where he came to your house? That the recordings you guys did together?
We did. I can't. My dear friend and colleague Randy Coleman Reese organized all that. I mean, he wasn't around in the very beginning of that,
Mhm,
but the recordings later, which were made just in a very crude way with a cassette tape recorder,
mhm,
Randy later took them and digitalized them and made them available. So um, yeah, so I don't know how what the chronology of those recordings
mhm,
happens to be or where they I didn't go back and listen to them.
okay. Mhm.
So I think they're online
Yeah.
if I'm not
Mhm,
mistaken. So
mhm,
they're still there, but it would be ideal to have them in some kind of chronological order,
mhm,
especially the ones where I'm pontificating,
mhm,
because
mhm,
my own, you know, the power of this insight, which is both revolutionary
mhm,
and deeply traditional.
mhm, mhm.
I mean, it's a combination of those two things.
Yes.
Um, those It takes a while to realize the scope of the issue,
Mhm, mhm,
and so even in my own work, and I knew Rene very well and visited with him often.
mhm,
It kept deepening,
mhm,
continues to this day.
mhm, mhm,
But it um, I was I was quite moved to discover that he was a very faithful Catholic and and saw his discoveries as being not only compatible with his faith,
mhm.
but deeply both informed by his faith and and also further informing the the faith itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's that's one thing I think about when I think about anthropology, how he was able to explain the gospels and how they relate to, human beings as our cultural dynamics, the thing, like prohibitions and taboos and myth and all of that. As a child, it always seemed to me that the gospels are just like any other book. They're teaching us morals on how to behave, and this is what God wants you to do, things. And then when he explained it, when he would explain stuff, passages from the Bible and the text, you know it was like, he was explaining sort of human nature, like
yeah,
our instincts and things like that. Uh we follow the crowd, the scapegoating. He talked about Peter's denial. And
right,
I was thinking to myself, man, I never, you know because there's so, when you read those passages, they're kind of short and you glance over them, you read it, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's just part of the story. Yeah, Peter,
yeah,
he was scared, and but once you start to think about it, it's like, no, that makes a lot of that makes a
yeah,
lot of sense. That brother that brother was scared, and
yeah,
he was trying to get out of there. And then he realizes, oh, Jesus actually told me exactly what it is I was going to do, and
yeah,
that's flee, flee from the scene, and you think about how profound that is, you know what I mean? Even though it's such a short scene within the scripture, it just,
yeah.
it's kind of like there's
Absolutely,
so much.
it's revelatory. That's why we call it revelation.
Yeah.
You know, when you say this, it makes me think of something that Rene did. I don't think I've ever expressed it this way, but you know, the early church had to wrestle with the Marcionite heresy,
Okay.
which said, you know, we don't have, we broke with the Jews,
Mm-hmm.
let's not bring any of that into this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different thing altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And the faith won out over that,
Right.
uh, because the Jew, we are connected.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we have a bond with our Jewish brethren today, and also with our forefathers in the faith. And the church was wise enough in the first 2 or 3 centuries to affirm that very powerfully.
Mm-hmm.
What Rene did is Rene showed that Christianity is also of a piece with the entire pagan world from the beginning of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
The origin that my second book dealt with the beginning and the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's eschatological, and it's also dealing with the foundations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I used Girard for the foundations.
Mm-hmm.
Human culture emerged at an event that is structurally identical
Mm-hmm.
to the crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, I think, legitimately,
Mm-hmm.
that our oldest ancestors uh, crudely, they stood at the foot of the cross,
Mm-hmm.
completely deluded and mad,
Mm-hmm.
but they turned it into religion.
Yes.
This is the thing that is so amazing.
Yeah.
They took all the passion of, so the way you, in case there are any of your listeners will know,
Mm-hmm.
the, when Pilate said it's better that one should die than the whole nation should be destroyed, I've said 1,000 times, he would have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize. But the economy of violence is incredible.
Yes.
So that is a tremendous insight.
Yes. Yeah.
He's revealing everything all the way back to the birth of human culture.
Right.
Was at the
Right.
birth of human culture, and this is one of Rene's great insights,
Yeah.
is a, a community that suddenly is in crisis,
Right.
and fear and anger and animosity,
Right.
and it only comes back together when everybody focuses their animosity on one figure,
Right.
and they lynch him.
Yes.
And suddenly, at the lynching, at the moment of his death,
Mm-hmm.
a hush falls over the community.
Mm-hmm.
It has a mystical power,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's the mystical power of the crucifixion
Mm-hmm.
operating proleptically
Yeah.
thousands of years before.
Right.
These are our ancestors, our oldest ancestors, stood at the foot of the cross,
Yeah.
and they didn't have the privilege
Mm-hmm.
of hearing Jesus say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Right.
But they did experience this purging of their animosities,
Mm-hmm.
and we wouldn't have a culture without it.
Right.
So, so Christianity, the paradigm of Christianity,
Yeah.
is what brought human culture into being.
Right. Right. Yeah. That is.
I mean,
That.
you could say a terribly distorted Christianity,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but still, you have to realize the power of Christianity, even when it's distorted,
Mm-hmm.
is enough to bring humanity into existence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I mean, when you think about the early ancestors, it's almost like, yeah, they weren't aware of the the sacrificial, I guess the mechanics of the sacrificial mechanism, but they saw it as a revelatory thing because it brought them peace. It restored peace back to their communities. So that in my mind, it's like they must have said, "Oh, this must be divine." If it has caused a sort of restoration in like you said, in a distorted way, right? Because it is through violence and killing, through human sacrifice.
You have to realize that's the birth of religion.
Right, right.
We can, from our point of view, we see it moralistically, and of
Mhm,
course, it's a moral abomination.
mhm,
But suddenly, at the death of the victim that they all, opposed, there's this sudden calm and they have a sense
mhm,
that something religious just happened.
mhm, mhm.
You see,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
if we if if we Catholics went to mass
Mhm,
and at the elevation of the host
mhm,
had the same experience
mhm.
that our most remote ancestors had
Yeah,
at the death of their victim,
right.
it would be good for us.
Yes,
We tend not to feel the depth of it.
yes. Mhm,
It goes all the way back. The birth of religion
mhm.
is a paradigm for the birth of Christianity, for the birth of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Right, right. Yeah, and our Western worldviews. That brings me to another question though, that you brought that up about the Eucharist, having, you know the it was talking to somebody that said, I said ritual, and they said it's not a ritual, it's a mass. It's
Uh,
so you can't say ritual, you say mass. But I'm not a I'm not a theologian, so
well,
I'm
it's
making
it's a liturgy. It's a
yeah,
liturgy.
it's a liturgy, right? So the liturgy, I was asking him, say, uh the memory of that, the further away you get from it, um, you know, sort of does it lose does the memory of it lose its effectiveness? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like
Well, sure.
you don't have all the you don't have all the ululations and the tambourines and the incense going and throwing the lambs on the fire,
Uh,
on the fire, and the priests and everybody's, this very euphoric sense of you know say what would have taken place in, second century Judaism, or some, you know uh religious tradition, like how the Hindus, with the fire ritual, what have you. So that sort of original scene of the passion, that you see with Christ's death, his crucifixion and the Last Supper, you know, is that sort of is it because we're so far removed from um the original memory that we have lost our sort of.
well, I don't not entirely because I went to mass this morning. I was at the foot of the cross. Now, was I mentally and spiritually present for that?
Mhm.
Not nearly as much as I should be.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
you know, we don't think as much as we should about Jesus understood our predicament,
Mhm.
and he understood that unless he took matters in hand,
Mhm.
his followers would remember him the
Mhm.
way everybody always remembers an important religious figure.
Mhm.
They would go to his grave.
Mhm.
They would set up a shrine.
Right.
They would uh, periodically, go there and have a ritual and so on.
Mhm.
That's how we humans, left to our own devices,
Right.
would remember him.
Right.
He knew that.
Okay.
So he
Yeah.
took matters into his own hands
Yes.
and he said, take this and eat it.
Yes. Yes.
Take this and drink. This is my body. Take
Yeah.
this and drink it. This is my blood. Do this.
Yeah.
in remembrance of me.
Right.
Do
Right.
this because there because the 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 Eucharist is a Eucharistic sacrifice. It's the pristination, the
Mhm.
representing
Mhm.
of the event itself.
Yes.
It's not just a uh, artificial reproduction of it.
Right.
It's the you know, presentation of it,
Mhm. Mhm.
so that we that's at the heart of our faith, not
Yeah.
just Roman Catholics, but others as well,
Yes.
and especially our Eastern brothers and sisters, but
Yeah.
many Protestants as well.
Yes.
So there, so Jesus takes, he understands our, because he's God himself. He
Mhm.
understands. He knows where it. Now Jesus, the man, had knew his heavenly Father,
Mhm.
but he was a human being,
Mhm.
so he had to, while he was on earth, he had to receive it from his Father on a moment by moment basis.
Mhm.
He wasn't the Father looking out over the expanse of 15 billion years. He
Right.
was so, but he was informed by his Father
Yeah.
to do this,
Yeah.
to leave. What are we going to leave? Imagine I mean, this is sacrilegious.
Mhm.
Imagine a conversation between the three persons of the Trinity.
Yeah.
You know, what are we going to leave them?
Right.
You know, Christ comes once,
Yeah.
the Spirit comes all the while,
Right.
but Christ comes once, he dies once,
Yeah.
he's born once, he lives once, he dies once.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? Well,
Right.
how about if he dies every day
Mhm.
on the altar,
Yes.
and it's remembered not just as a past event,
Yeah.
but it's reproduced,
Mhm.
and that we Jesus said, "This is my blood.
Yeah.
Drink it. This is
Yeah.
my body. Eat it."
Right.
That's what the first cannibals did.
Yes.
You see,
Yeah.
it ties everything together. It's
Yes.
amazing. And Rene saw, now he saw it not in a flash of insight, although in a way that's, he did see it in a flash of insight,
Mhm.
but only after he had become quite familiar with the anthropological data. He
Mhm.
read he read the anthropologist,
Yeah.
and then somebody told him he should go back and read the Old Testament, and he read the Old Testament,
Yeah.
and suddenly he saw how these things fit together.
Yeah.
It will take a long time
Mhm.
for even those of us who are familiar with his work,
Mhm.
and of course we only people old like me, they only have a few more years,
No, don't
but
say
the
that.
church, it will take the church a long time
Mhm.
uh, to absorb
Mhm.
what Girard did for us, in the
Yeah.
sense that he saw the deep, profound meaning
Yeah.
of the events of the New Testament and its reenactment in at the Mass. So
Right. Right. Yeah. And yeah. I mean, it was the book, the title, things hidden since the foundation of the world. That I think that alludes to that.
yeah,
The
yeah,
cannibalism, the human sacrifice, and all of that. And I, even I think even with Christians, we don't really think about this whole the whole fact of eating the body of Christ and drinking his blood, is it is at first glance, it's scandalous, it scandalizes you, So I think with Christians, we kind of just think, oh well, this is just part of being a Christian, you know what I mean? But it's like, if you think about what the first when Jesus said that in the Gospels, that unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. I believe it said. And and I was telling another friend, and he said, and the people started flick, they started going away from him. And he said, so he
That's
told the
right.
disciples, he said, are you gonna leave us too? Leave me too? And Peter said, Lord, where shall we go? You have the words to eternal life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
Absolutely.
it's it's uh it's such a powerful thing, because like you said, it reaches back to sort of the prehistory, the
Absolutely.
non-written things that human beings did to each other. And then you start looking through archaeology and a lot of the rituals that you see with various people, even though it's sort of been diluted. They take a vegetable, or they take a animal, and they sacrifice
Right.
it. It's like underneath that, you can see,
Yeah.
maybe there was something a little more going on there that we don't
And
want to we don't want to admit, right? But it's because of Christianity, right? It's because of Christianity that, one, we have that's been revealed to us, you know, and then two, that I think also that we are um, repelled by it, repelled by that type of violence, because it's Christianity has opened that up to us. This idea of being you know being nonviolent, and care for your neighbor, and things of that nature. But I
well,
want to,
before
yeah, go ahead.
just before we get too far away from this, I want
Hmm.
to say something else.
Hmm.
Um, when Jesus said, "This is my body and this is my blood," he
Hmm.
holds up bread and wine.
Hmm.
It's very important to notice that you don't go pick bread off a tree.
Hmm.
You don't find wine flowing in a creek.
Right.
Both of those elements require human participation.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So you could say, in speaking broadly, you could say the revelation that Christ brought
Hmm.
had to await a moment in history when humanity was at least theoretically capable
Hmm.
of participating in the revelation.
Hmm.
So it's as though God patiently waited
Yeah.
for the fruits of the earth
Right.
to be molded by human hands
Yes.
into the ingredients from which he could then. So
Right.
it waits for us to grow to a certain point
Yeah.
so that we are making our contribution to this mystery. It's
Right.
not just we produce the wherewithal and Christ transforms it.
Yes. Yes. I wonder if that has any, um, you know, just going off the top of my mind, I wonder if that has any allusion to the first murder, of like between Cain and Abel. Cain gives grain and
Yeah.
first harvest to God, but he refuses it, you know, but it hasn't been, uh, that human agency is not there. It's just sort of, it's just grapes or
Yeah.
whatever, and wheat. It hasn't, like you said, that sort of turning it into something else, or human agency being there. So I wonder if there's not something to that theologically, like, uh
Well, it
the,
may be, and I'm with you. We're just, we're just
yeah.
rattling on. But there may be something even for primitive peoples. I grew up in East Tennessee, where if somebody had a sick dog,
Mhm.
they took him out in the woods and shot him,
Mhm.
and then wept.
Mhm. Mhm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something about slaughtering an animal
mhm,
especially if it's one you've lived with,
mhm,
that no matter, you may be doing it to provide food for your family and so on,
mhm,
but there's something that touches the human heart
mhm, mhm,
about a sacrifice of an animal that you
mhm.
don't get from turning grain into bread.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so you could even, I never thought about this before, but you brought it up.
Okay, yeah.
And you could even see, you can see how Abel's sacrifice
Mhm,
had that emotional dimension to it
mhm,
that Cain's didn't have, and
mhm,
therefore it didn't have religious possibility.
mhm. Okay. Yes.
And these things, it's it's very, as important it is for us to think about these things morally.
Mhm,
Uh, we have to realize uh, that we were brought out of our infancy
mhm,
by events that were shocking,
mhm, mhm,
and
mhm,
and so uh, and Christ reenacted that, and then He gave us the wherewithal to sacramentally or symbolically reenact it.
mhm,
And I wouldn't even use the word symbolically is too shallow a term because
mhm,
it's more than that. But yeah, I think choosing animal sacrifice over grain
mhm.
uh, is consistent with the whole picture.
Yes. Yeah. 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 That's a yeah. I mean, to see the bloodshed of an animal that you've sort of weaned and taken care of, you know, have being slaughtered. I mean, I'm sure that would have caused some distress. It's just like I have
At
to give
least more than making a bowl of porridge.
up. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So I wanna talk about your latest book. Uh, just briefly, not to give everything away and everything, because I ordered it and I have yet to read it, so I'm waiting on it to arrive. Uh,
Oh, I should have sent you one. Doggone
oh
it.
no, no, it's perfectly fine.
Oh, oh.
It's perfectly fine. I'm glad I'm able to be talking to you. That's good. That's more than enough for me. I'm grateful. But if you can just maybe give a short description of sort of what the book is about, and uh, what I have to
Well,
look forward to reading.
I I used to say this about my first book. People said, "What's it about?" And I'd say, "It's about 350 pages." Anyway,
Yeah, that's a good one.
this book is about um, the 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 difference between the self and the person,
Mhm.
and we use them interchangeably, but we shouldn't,
Okay.
because the self is an idea of a standalone entity.
Mhm.
The person is embedded in tradition and family and commitments. It's an embedded experience,
Yeah.
and we have, for the last several hundred years, we have been toying with the idea of autonomy,
Mhm. Mhm.
individual autonomy.
Mhm.
And there are some important things that we have put in place in terms of cultural barriers against the violation of some person's personal autonomy. Those are good things.
Mhm.
But the idea of autonomy is simply not true. It's not true of us. We are not autonomous
Right.
creatures.
Right.
We all, the other thing is that this idea coincided with the idea that religion is passe,
Mhm.
and that we must either reduce it to moralistic, to morals
Mhm.
and so on,
Yeah.
or leave it and go on to better things.
Right.
but we're religious people.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we have religious longings in us.
Yes.
This is an anthropological question.
Yes.
The truth, the anthropological truth about us
Mm-hmm.
is that we have religious longings,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they are deeply implanted in us.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have overridden them
Mm-hmm.
with all kinds of other concerns,
Mm-hmm.
but sooner or later they'll stir.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and the problem is if we do not provide a a place proper for the exploration of this mystery,
Mm-hmm.
it will spill out into the world
Mm-hmm.
and turn into the most outrageous ideologies.
Yeah.
Because ideologies are nothing but secular religions.
Right. Right.
And all ideologies fundamentally point to the culprit
Mm-hmm.
that is standing in the way of progress, or whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been, we have been, we have suffered ideologies
Mm-hmm.
for since, well, I mean, where do you begin? Where do you start the clock?
Yeah.
The French Revolution, but it was before that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But these are uh, they are political uh, movements
Mm-hmm.
that are shot through with religious passion. And the one thing you don't want is to have religious passion and political ideologies wed, because then you get real madness. So uh, we're in an anthropological crisis, and at the center of that crisis is a religious question. And one of the key elements of that crisis is the difference between the person and the self. The person, as I said, is suffused with connections to the past, to the future, to one's fellows, and so on. And one of the ways that I've quickly tried to do in the book is to contrast two statements that characterize our situation. One is from Anthony Kennedy's uh, decision in the Supreme Court case of Casey. And it's very famous, everybody knows it. He said, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life." In other words, we can make it up as we go along. The two statements that I use in the book
Mm-hmm.
to contrast the difference between the self and the person
Mm-hmm.
is Judge Kennedy's decision in the 1992 Supreme Court case Casey.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life." Meaning, we can just make it up as we go along. There's no there. You get to choose, which is what now passes for common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I would contrast that with what Romano Guardini. Guardini was a great a German theologian in the 20th century.
Okay.
And he says in one of his writings, "At the heart of liberty is the," I'm sorry, I'm reading the Kennedy decision. He said, Guardini says, "The knowledge of what it means to be a person is inextricably bound up with the faith of Christianity. An
Mm-hmm.
affirmation and a cultivation of the personal can endure for a time, perhaps, after faith has been extinguished, but gradually they too will be lost."
Mm-hmm.
What, what we call the person,
Mm-hmm.
you have to remember the word person came into intellectual and philosophical uh, prominence
Mm-hmm.
uh, thanks to Christianity.
Right.
Tertullian, since I'm quoting things,
Mhm.
Tertullian is the one who said there are three persons in one God.
Okay.
That that was a revolution.
Yeah.
That was a revolution.
Yeah.
There are three persons in one God. Those persons are not, they're distinct,
Hmm.
but they're not, they're they can't be separated.
Right.
They're bound. And he's also the one who said uh, that the soul is naturally Christian.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
the soul is naturally Christian. This is the sort of metaphysical parallel to the idea that the first sacrifice, which was the birth of culture, was a prefiguration of the crucifixion.
Hmm. Hmm.
The emergence of the first human person is is the it is touched by what brings personhood into existence,
Right.
which
Right.
is the sense of being connected to God
Hmm.
and to one another.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so what I try to do in that book is first of all to distinguish between the self and the person,
Hmm.
and then to discuss what a shriveled, dangerous prospect it is to try to shore up the self sufficiently to make one's feel that there's meaning in one's life.
Right.
A pure self, which is unconnected
Hmm.
historically to those who came before and those who come after,
Hmm.
horizontally to all of our contemporaries and so on. That idea of the self is absolutely barren and
Hmm.
and unsatisfying.
Hmm.
So what happens when people live in that world is that they they uh, they opt for some ideology
Right.
which appears to unite them with other people,
Right.
but it unites them in a kind of demonic way.
Right.
And
Right.
so they and so the these the, the the desiccated, shriveled up idea of the self
Hmm.
finds its cure
Hmm.
in ideologies which eventually become violent and
Yeah.
dangerous, and our world is filled with them.
Right. 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 Yeah. I mean, you definitely uh, see that, in our current, our uh, contemporary world. That there's a lot of, especially like media wise and culturally and stuff like that. And I'm just I'm wondering, you know, even though Christianity, you know, has brought the idea of personhood into existence, it's like now we see ourselves as individuals. We see ourselves as, well, I'm responsible for myself. I'm just worried about me. I don't have time for I don't have time for nobody else.
Yeah, yeah,
And um, you know, and also the idea that, like, yeah, I want to think for myself. I don't want to be responsible to, you know, anybody else or my community, those around me, you know. Um, and one way I see this playing out is very much so in the whole idea of people feeling lonely. You know, they feel like they don't have, the sort of reciprocity, being able to, be around others and, you know, uh, connect with others, so that, and so I think a lot of that, like what you talk about, you know, a sense of, like, we rely on each other, when we talk about desires or cues and things like that. And, we're sort of losing that. And I think it does cause a little bit of, what's the word? I mean, well, insanity, I guess, if you don't have people to reciprocate, you know what I mean, the charity and the, a sense of community, they just become, um, you know, bitter, angry, uh, and and it finds, and then that bitterness, the anger, and everything, it finds its way out in, you got, you talk about guys who spend a lot of time, all they do is watch online and they
Oh,
listen to these kind of things,
unbelievable.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And then what that does to a person, because it's like there's no feedback. They're just hearing a lot of stuff, and they're like, you know what, that really does make me mad. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
you know, do this thing, but it's because they've already sort of come into this idea that I'm an individual, I'm a person. I don't really need to have contact with other
Uh-huh.
people, that physical, that like real sense of contact,
Yeah.
and I was talking to Dr. Goulden about that. He said, it's all about reciprocity. That one thing I think, like everybody says about like COVID, right? One thing that COVID did is it made us more isolated,
Yeah.
and that our generation is sort of the most, I guess my generation is, and Gen Z are sort of the most isolated generation, you know,
Yeah.
uh, that there's ever been. And you think about like the sort of ramifications of that. What that's
Well,
going to.
yeah, but let me give you a little word of encouragement. It's not encourage. I mean, it's encouragement, but it's a daunting task.
Mhm,
But again, I want to use Christian uh, terminology and so on.
mhm,
You could say that the people you're talking about who are stuck in themselves and don't feel these connections,
mhm.
you could imagine. I never thought about this until just this minute, so
Okay.
you
Okay.
take this with a grain of salt. But somebody's looking around now,
Mhm,
to use Christian terminology.
mhm.
Somebody looks around and says, "Why don't they recognize Christ in me?
Right.
Why don't
Mhm.
why don't why don't why doesn't somebody recognize Christ in me?"
Right.
They don't have the vocabulary to express that.
Mm,
But the answer to that is, why don't you go and recognize it in somebody else?
mm, mhm,
If you feel so forlorn because nobody recognizes the Christ in you,
right.
go out there and recognize it in somebody else, and you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
may even find somebody that reciprocates.
Yes. Yes. It might be an overflow of reciprocation.
Right.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, it's all about, I think, self due diligence. You know what I mean? It's like you have to do your part too, and things like that. But that brings me to my next question, and I'm not gonna try to hold you up because we've been we've been talking and had some pauses here technically, but uh, I wanted to talk to you about the circumstances within the church right now. With the leadership, it's sort of I guess what's the right word, so I don't sound like I'm uh, you know so I don't sound heretical or anything. Um, well, it's the leadership of Pope Francis seems a little ambiguous. I guess if that's the right word to use. It's hard to really know what his where he's trying to lead the church. You know, um, I think it's in good faith. Like, he's not intentionally trying to do anything wrong, but it's just his, it's his policies. It's sort of, like a president. They have these policies. These are the things they want to happen. They don't see it as being like they're not being malicious, but it certainly seems like it's working against the well-being of the church, you know, and um, so I just want to get
Yeah,
your.
well,
I don't
you
want
opened up a can of worms there.
to.
There are a number of things. You said leadership,
Yeah.
and I think we might distinguish between uh, one's office
Mm-hmm.
and leadership, real leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There are some tremendous leaders in the church today.
Mm-hmm.
Cardinal Zen, for example,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, and others that I
Yeah.
could name.
Yeah.
Uh, th- uh, the the authority of the Pope is is important,
Mm-hmm.
but only insofar as uh, what he formulates in terms of faith and doctrine
Mm-hmm.
is consistent with the inheritance. We we Catholics and Christians generally
Mm-hmm.
are people who we didn't make it up.
Mm-hmm.
We inherit it. We
Right.
inherit it from our Jewish, you know, forebears and from especially the canonical events of the first few centuries.
Mm-hmm.
We can't depart from that.
Right.
We can develop it, as Cardinal Newman argued so eloquently,
Mm-hmm.
but the development has to be a natural outgrowth of what went before it.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot break with what went before it.
Mm-hmm.
These are iron laws
Yeah.
in terms of now we can Pope Francis declared that his what he wanted to do was make a mess,
Mm-hmm.
and on that score he's succeeded fantastically.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still the Pope. He
Mm-hmm.
deserves our prayers,
Mm-hmm.
but we are in a terrible crisis in the
Yeah.
church, and
Yeah.
it will take 100 years to recover.
Wow.
I think it will take 100 years to recover
Wow.
because the culture that is trying to swallow the church
Mm-hmm.
is immensely powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it will result, our brothers and sisters in Africa and the Middle East are being murdered
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And our descendants may well join them
Mm-hmm.
in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
This could be very, very dangerous in terms of uh, those who come after us.
Yes.
So I think it's a perilous time. We have to pray, and we have
Yeah.
to try not to be scandalized.
Mm-hmm.
To be scandalized is to become all agitated by it. I think we can't do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to realize the gravity of what's happening,
Yeah.
and prayer and sacrifice. And there will be another pope, and there will be a pope after him, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to count on the Holy Spirit
Yes.
being the one that's directing this
Yeah.
or allowing certain things to happen. But I would say something in terms of not what's going on in Rome, much
Mm-hmm.
of which is tremendously distressing,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of us,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't, uh, I don't think very many people convert or deepen their faith because of, so although I take it back already, because with John Paul II and Benedict XVI, people
Mm-hmm.
were drawn to the faith for sure.
Yes.
But a lot of us are sociological. Let's just speak in terms of Catholic stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's true of our Protestant and Orthodox as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are sociological Catholics.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I tell you, sociological Catholicism doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of surviving the onslaught that we're about to experience.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's incredibly important
Mm-hmm.
that we, each of us, tries to undergo an evangelization process ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then in whatever way we're called to become agents of that
Yeah.
for the sake of our brothers and sisters
Yeah.
who who are, for those of us, for our brothers and sisters who are going along for the ride
Mm-hmm.
and who may be swept, to use a different metaphor, they may
Mm-hmm.
be swept off the deck of the Titanic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
uh, we need to deepen our faith,
Yeah.
and I pray that the crisis that is besets the church today
Yeah.
will bestir the Holy Spirit
Mm-hmm.
in our world and in our hearts,
Yeah.
and that we will have a a rebirth of of Catholic faith that
Mm-hmm.
our forebears in the faith would recognize,
Yeah.
and that our descendants will be attracted to.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but it is a difficult time, and you expressed it as carefully and
Yeah.
respectfully as you did, and that's
Yeah.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
But it's a very serious issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe this is me trying to be, you know, sort of very light light-footed about it. I always try to be light-footed about these kind of situations because you don't know how you don't know how serious somebody's gonna take it. So you always try to be in peace. But I liken it to, and I was telling my friend this. I said I liken to what we're going through now as sort of a teaching lesson by the Holy Spirit. Of and discernment. That this is this is a teaching lesson for us. You have to, uh, and that yes, it's going to take, like you said, a little bit. We're going. You know, a friend of mine said, Christians are no longer afforded the ability to be lukewarm,
Exactly, exactly.
or like you said, sociological Catholics.
Yeah,
Catholic in name.
yeah,
Which is that you know I guess as a younger person, I would say, yeah, man, that's kind of little, like, why my generation, why
yeah,
why can't I be just the
yeah.
a good old Catholic, dad, and watch football on Sunday, and maybe around Easter I'll go to mass. But yeah, I mean, that is not that is not, I guess, what we are afforded anymore. We have to really start taking it seriously. If we say we're Catholics, we have to believe that and walk it.
Well, I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
I've done, since the book came out, and even before that, I've
Hmm.
done a number of podcasts.
Hmm.
I've never enjoyed one as much as I've enjoyed this one.
Oh, thank you. I
Because,
appreciate that. Thank you.
and your spirit is very contagious, and I
Thank you.
think, yeah, I think you, we should be grateful
Mhm.
for the challenges that
Mhm.
cause us to go deeper.
Yes. Yes.
And so, and I think that's something that you represent. And what's important is, if uh, we are we are ambassadors,
Hmm.
and that doesn't mean just in terms of church or
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
Just as we go through our daily lives, and I can tell by our conversation, you're exactly what I'm about to describe.
Okay. Yes.
What we have to do is live our life in such a way
Hmm.
that when people catch a glimpse of us,
Hmm.
they realize that there's something that person has
Hmm.
that is making him or her shine
Mhm.
in a way that I wish I could shine.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not not in an envious way,
Mhm. Mhm.
but we should be sufficiently suffused
Mhm.
with our faith and with grace
Mhm.
to have it shed as we walk through our lives,
Yeah.
and so we become apostles or disciples uh, in ways that are not doctrinal,
Mhm.
but they're
Yeah.
existential.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is a tremendous opportunity
Yeah.
to to conduct ourselves in a way where people say, "What?"
Mhm.
That it makes them after a while, maybe not the first encounter, but after a while they see something. And I'll bet you that there are dozens and dozens of people
Mhm.
who you have encountered who've had that experience. I
Yeah.
can tell.
Well, all praise due to God. I take no credit. I take no credit in that, but I appreciate that. I'm very grateful. I say I'm working on it. I'm working on
you're, I
it.
think you're a marvelous example of what we need.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, hey, I want to leave off on a good note. It's we're coming close to the, I guess, what is the end of Christmas. January 7th will be the Epiphany, right? The celebration of the coming of the gifts. The Magi come with the gifts, and then we'll be leading into Lent in February on Valentine's Day.
Oh, really?
So,
Oh, yeah. I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. So, any anything you want to say towards that, or uh, any plans you have? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Uh, I, we might conclude. I hadn't thought about this, and I hope
Mhm.
this is a prayer I say every day. So
Yeah.
now that I'm on the spot, I might not say it, but
Oh no.
I have a prayer we might end with, which is the Cardinal Newman prayer,
Okay.
John Henry Newman.
Yes.
May the Lord support us all the day long till the shades lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then in his mercy may give the safe lodging, holy rest, and peace at last. Amen.
Oh man. Well, thank you, Mr. Bailey. It
Oh,
was really a
listen,
pleasure.
it's by the way, it's Gil and
Okay.
Shannon. Thank you. I've enjoyed
Thank
it
you.
so much.
Thank you so much. Let's maybe we can do this again later on in
Sure,
the year. Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
All
God
right.
bless. Thank you so
God
much.
bless you.